So to start off, I want to say that the world right now is in a perfect storm. And this is a picture from a movie called A Perfect Storm that describes a fisherman going out in the Atlantic Ocean and ending up at the epicenter of 3 storms coming at him and his crew from different directions. And I believe this is a metaphor for what we're facing on the planet right now. Is there are 3 major storms converging on all of humanity at this same time. 3 major crises: that of COVID-19, that of the climate crisis, and a crisis of leadership, and particularly around the polarization of so many cultures, societies, and institutions. So it feels like a pretty scary and dangerous time. At the same time, when we think about the Kundalini experience, that often those experiences come about as a result of crisis. And this is an image that I found on the internet that I think represents an alternate way of seeing this perfect storm of energies coming together. And that is that it can be a pivot point for us collectively as humanity to raise our collective Kundalini energy. So we are in the midst of a global awakening. And my research on transformation, and many people have mentioned something similar today, is that no systems transformation can happen without personal transformation. We need to do our own inner work. And that's not the only dynamic going on. There is an increase in transformation in individuals. I think if we are able to keep track of it, we could actually measure an increase in the number of people who have Kundalini experiences and who are undertaking contemplative practices and experiencing the positive outcomes of that. So contemplative practice of any kind is really central to the personal transformation of leaders in today's world. And what that leads to is a shift from the focus on me, my needs, my wants, my ego, to a focus on we, that I'm not the only one, that we're in this collectively, to a sense of all. And the all is not only the rest of humanity, the all is sentient beings and other forms that we may not think of as sentient, but might be, like rocks and crystals and the planet itself and the cosmos itself. So this expansion of consciousness. All my research points to evidence that we collectively are evolving and that consciousness is evolving, and that there's an increasing number of Kundalini experiences. And what I think is happening now is that we're in the midst of a collective Kundalini experience as humanity. And that a principle around that is not to give in to fear, which so many people are, because things are unpredictable, they're chaotic, they're so for so many people the sense of reality that we've hung on to has shifted and we can't predict what the future is. But to stand in vision and to stand in our own particular calling and sense of passion is so much stronger than fear. And the Kundalini experiences, as several of our speakers have explained, lead to a new sense of vision and passion for our individual lives, which is now coalescing into something greater, networking, a greater sense that we're all together collectively sharing vision and passion for a new world. There's many organizations and movements that are coming together collectively, which I find so exciting. Also, that awakening happens in 2 ways. One is that evolutionary way of committed to a daily practice, and over time there's a deepening. But the second way is quantum leaps. And in some research I did with fellow colleagues about transformation in the workplace, we concluded that what was most impactful in transformation was something that some people called grace, other people called magic, and other people called miracles, and that's sudden, like the fall of the Berlin Wall. It's not always predictable, and it's very sudden, and it shifts everything. And finally, the global awakening is a response to trauma and threat collectively on so many different fronts. So I want to share with you this model called Archetypes of Change that is research-based. It's a model of how people respond to change, and in it there are 5 archetypes, and I'll go into how I evolved this over time. So I researched by talking to many individuals, particularly in business. My background is a business professor and a business researcher and consultant, and I interviewed people that were identified as spiritually based leaders. They had, their identity was that spirituality was core to who they are and how they lived. And in that research, I was able to summarize 5 qualities that just about every single person had. Qualities like self-awareness, qualities like vision, and an unusual one that came up, which was playfulness. And that they had 5 skills that they used to keep grounded in the material world and deeply connected to the spiritual world, or the world of energy, or the world of transformation. They had different language for that. But the 5 skills included a skill of really being able to see and sense into the future, the skill of manifesting, the skill of being super focused, which contemplative practices help with so much, and related skills around helping change come about. So the model of the Archetypes of Change has 2 continua on it. One is time orientation. Basically, are you future-oriented or past-oriented or present-oriented? And the other is change orientation, whether or not you're open to change or closed to change. And I'll share it on the individual level, but I think it's also occurring on the collective level, each of these archetypes. What this model does not talk about is a personality type. So I'll be sharing 5 boxes in the model, but it is not, even though I may talk about it that way, it is not I'm this or I'm that. It is that these are different ways I can see and relate to change depending on my particular situation. What I do think the model is useful for is an exploration of relationship to change and how we can be more impactful. And it's useful for really generative conversations within a team, within an organization, or just our own inner conversation. So this is the model, and if we look at the top, the continuum of change, it goes from closed to open. And if we look at the top right box, and I'll go through each of these 5 archetypes in more detail in a minute, but if we look at the top box, we see that Edgewalkers are more open to change. And if we look at the continuum of time on the left-hand side, it goes from past to future. So Edgewalkers are open and future-oriented, and on the future-oriented side, going down a box, you see the Flamekeepers, who are open to change, but more focused on the past. Continuing around, you go to Placeholders. They're closed to change and focused on the past. And then going up to the left-hand side top box, the Guardians are closed to change, but always looking at the future. And in the middle, you have Hearthtenders, and they're much more contingency responders. That means it depends on the situation if they're going to be open or closed to change. But what really drives them in a central way is a sense of service, of serving something that's greater than themselves. So I'm going to go through each one of these descriptions, and then I'm going to ask you, if you'd like to be involved, to evaluate where you are on a continuum of each of these archetypes. And knowing that we all have them in us, and that different situations evoke a particular worldview in response to change. So Edgewalkers, as I said, they're future-oriented and open to change. And in the Edgewalkers I interviewed, some kind of kundalini or transformative spiritual experience was extremely common, and usually a shift in their worldview. So they could be defined as walking between the worlds. I normally define that as walking between the spiritual world and the material world. But it could also be defined as walking between cultures or walking between functions in an organization. So for instance, one of the people I interviewed that I learned a lot from was a woman who was very good at IT, at information technology, and her heart was really in the human side of the business, into human resources. And in her organization, she would play a bridging role between human resources and information technology. She could speak both languages and help both functions understand each other. She also was a deeply spiritual person, and I think that helped her to walk between worlds and build those bridges much more strongly. A strong spiritual life is really central to who Edgewalkers are. They're committed to some kind of spiritual practice, to some kind of often belonging to a spiritual community, and really being very clear about what their spiritual values are. And what makes them different from a lot of people that we find, say, in the New Age community, or say, for instance, most people in the artistic community, is that they're very practical and grounded, and that they're business-oriented, they can get things done, but they attribute that groundedness and effectiveness to their spiritual life. So taking a look at this, and I'm going to provide you a summary definition on the next slide. Here we go. This is the definition, and I invite you, like on a piece of paper or in your mind, to oops, I went too far, sorry. On this line, this continuum, just put a mark of, is this very much like you, or is it really unlike you? Do you relate to this definition, or is this really not at all like you? So the definition is people who walk between worlds and have the ability to build bridges between the different worlds, have a strong spiritual life, also very grounded and effective in the everyday material world. So I'll give you a moment to assess yourself, how much this is like you or unlike you. And now I'll move on to the next archetype of change, called the Flamekeeper. The Flamekeeper is really focused on that time continuum, on the past. And they're willing to move into the future if it builds on the past. They really honor the past and are open to change if we can take the best from the past and move it into the future. So in terms of change, if somebody were to want to bring about change in an organization, or if we look even at the whole planet, a Flamekeeper is going to say, what is the core founding vision of this organization? Or we could say, what is the core founding vision of humanity? Why is humanity on Earth? Why did we come here? What is our purpose in the greater scheme of things? So they're always looking into the founding vision and founding values. Extremely value-centered. They'll match every decision against a core set of values. So again, an opportunity to self-assess, the definition being people who keep the original vision and values of the organization alive. How much is this very much like me or unlike me? And it's possible to be high on each of these 5 scales I'm giving you, or low or moderate. It's just any pattern. It's possible to be a mixture of all of these. The third archetype of change is the Hearthtenders, and if you go back to that model that I shared a few pages back, that's the one that's right in the center. So their focus is on the present, and I'm not saying this in terms of a contemplative practice of being in the present moment, and yet that's probably the most comfortable place. It's just that they tend not to think about the future, they tend not to plan for the future, and they also don't think too much about the past. It's really a question of what's in front of me right now that I need to attend to. And that comes out of a deep sense of service to others. They often don't want to be in the limelight, but they do like being in the background of something important to serve others and make positive things happen. They're moderately open to change, but like I said earlier, it depends. So they see themselves as someone who keeps the home fires burning. They really have a strong sense of family. They remember people's birthdays, or they remember holy days or holidays, and they focus on efficiency. How can I be of most service in an efficient manner? And so I'll be open to change if you can help me be more efficient, if you can make my service to others easier. But as if I'm coming from that hearth-tending point of view, if what you're proposing to me is going to make my life more difficult, I'm going to resist that, because I want to be of service, and what you're proposing will get in the way of that. We can think of this in a global sense now as we face climate change, and climate change is disrupting our lives and will disrupt our lives even more, particularly if we as humanity commit to doing what's necessary to make a world that works for everyone. We're going to need to be less focused on consumerism, more focused on service, and it's our Hearthtenders who can really help us get there because of their focus on efficiency. So again, a self-assessment opportunity, the definition being people who get the day-to-day work of the organization or any system, get that work done, and who are focused on serving others. Is this very like me, unlike me, or somewhere in the middle? Moving on now to placeholders. Placeholders are focused on the past, and they definitely don't like change. They're closed to change. They don't want to see change happening. They want stability. That's really central to keeping things predictable. They don't care for dreaming. If you ask them what their vision of the future is, they think that that's not even a worthwhile question to ask. You're impractical, you're dreaming. They don't value that. It's just like, leave me alone and let me do what I've always done, because I've gotten good at it over time. I'll commit to helping this organization, this family, this country, this world. I'll commit to helping it be stable, but don't rock the boat. I want to hold this place steady. And this is the wrong definition, but in terms of placeholders, it's being someone who holds on to the past and who prefers stability. How much is this like me or unlike me? And the last one, guardians. The guardians are actually like the shadow side of the Edgewalker. They focus very much on the future, but they focus on the future from a fear point of view. I imagine, Andrew, if we could do brain scans of their brains as they think about the future, their amygdalas would light up. They're very fearful that things are going to go wrong. And yet they're highly intuitive. Their gift is they can help see what could go wrong, and their commitment to serving is through preventing problems and trying to protect people or protect the organization. So they want to not have harm happen, and they're the ones who can look ahead and say, if we do this, this bad thing could happen. How do we prevent it? So the definition is people who tend to see all the things that could go wrong, to be a future problem. They have a gift for analyzing or sensing what could go wrong before it happens. They're committed to protecting people and the organization. And these days, the social and spiritual activists want to protect the world from potential harm. So imagine the 25,000 people at COP26 who showed up to support Greta Thunberg and to be, to be on the streets, to speak to power. Those are the guardians. How much is this like me or unlike me? So to wrap this up, what's needed today is actually the healthy side of each one of these archetypes. But more than ever, we need the Edgewalkers. We need those who see into the future, who know how to manifest it, who know how to bring it into reality. And Edgewalkers are often so on the edge that they're marginalized and are not feeling connected to the greater network of people that are making a difference. That's one of the things Susan and I and a colleague of ours, Patricia Campanile, we work together to create a community of Edgewalkers so that people don't feel alone and that they're part of something bigger and that they have the courage to do the work they're called to do. And that's what the Emerging Sciences Foundation does as well, is bringing together the leading edge scientists and the leading edge spiritual practitioners and the integration so that we really have the courage to be on the edge of walking into the future, knowing we're doing this collectively, not a lone voice in the wilderness. The Flamekeepers are needed in helping us remember core values. I've forgotten who it was that did the beautiful presentation today of how the traditions from over 2,000 years ago and to 1,100 years ago and so on in the various Theraveda traditions and so on have core values that really are needed in humanity today. The Hearthtenders are the ones that are going to be doing the practical day-to-day work of getting the newsletters out, setting up the websites, making sure people know about events, and tending to the details that keep a movement and a community going. The Placeholders remind us that if we go too far over the edge, we're going to lose the stability of what we're working on. So we need to listen to them, particularly if we're moving too far ahead of where the mainstream is. They can help pull us back into being a bridge between the future and the current times. And the guardians, with their intuition and their forebodings, can help us from not going down a wrong path, but keeping us on a path towards a collective future that works for all. So to share some resources very quickly, our website is edgewalkers.org. I've had you assess your stance on what archetype of change is strongest for you, and my advice around these archetypes is whatever your strength is, you want to build on that. Wherever you marked yourself as the highest score, that's a gift. That is your natural way of seeing the world. So you want to move into developing that particular worldview, knowing that it's valuable. The Archetypes of Change survey is a scientific, valid and reliable instrument that's on our website that goes into much more detail and provides a 24-page report with action items on how you can develop yourself if you're interested in that. We also have a newsletter that tells you about events such as our monthly Edgewalker cafes, and there's another instrument called the Edgewalker Profile that looks at your Edgewalker skills and your Edgewalker qualities. And I've put my email there, so if you want to do a screenshot of this page, you're all set. And I just wanted to close with this quote from Patanjali, who's considered the founder of yoga, because I think it's really a beautiful quote about Edgewalkers and about what we do when we've had the Kundalini experience. He wrote, when you are inspired by some great purpose, some extraordinary project, all your thoughts break their bonds, your mind transcends limitations, your consciousness expands in every direction, and you find yourself in a new, great, and wonderful world. Dormant forces, faculties, and talents become alive, and you discover yourself to be a greater person by far than you ever dreamed yourself to be. Thank you.